Well, folks, welcome to another episode of the Nobleman Podcast, and we are grateful to have as a guest today a guy that I've never met in person. We were together last week at the convention. We just never bumped into each other. But Kyle Bueermann is with the North American Mission Board. He's also serving at a local church in Lubbock, Texas. But his new role with the North American Mission Board is focusing on rural churches, small rural churches. So, Kyle, welcome to the Nobleman Podcast, and tell us a little bit about your assignments. What's the Lord got you doing right now?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. So, as you mentioned, my name is Kyle Bueermann. I live in Lubbock, Texas. I work for the North American Mission Board as a rural specialist, which really means I serve churches and local associations and Baptist state conventions all over North America. And so, a lot of times, like when folks out here in West Texas learn kind of who I am and what I do, they assume I've been assigned to this area, which is overall very rural. No, we just, when we were given the opportunity and told, hey, you can live anywhere, just needs to be near an airport, we moved back to West Texas, which was home. And so, we've been here just over 5 years.
Okay.
Back in Lubbock. Before that, I was a pastor for almost 9 years in New Mexico, pastored 2 churches there. And then before that, I was involved in youth and music ministry for several years after college. And so now I find myself, in addition to my full-time role at NAM, I'm on staff at our church here in Lubbock as the discipleship minister. And that is a very, very part-time role. And then I'm a youth ministry volunteer. So I've kind of come full circle. Started my ministry career in youth ministry, and now I'm back in it as a volunteer Sunday school teacher, lead worship for our youth on Wednesday nights. And my wife and I have 2 kids. I say 2 kids in the youth ministry. Our son just graduated, so he is on his way out. And then our daughter will be a senior. So we have our last couple of years of youth ministry in the house.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We have 4 kids. Our youngest daughter gets married next weekend as we're recording this. And so Stacy and I are going to be, full on empty nesters, because our kids will all be living in different states, all 4 kids in 4 different states, and none of them in our state. So it's going to be a new season for us as well.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, I had not followed your whole story, but tell me about pastoring in New Mexico, because pretty sparsely populated in a lot of areas. Yeah. So is that how you kind of cut your teeth on this whole rural church concept, or how did NAM tap you for that?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small rural community here in West Texas, about 2,000 people. My dad was a cotton farmer. And West Texas, for anybody that's ever been out here, it's flat as can be. There's no trees. And so we grew up like on the north end of our little town called Tahoka, about 30 miles south of Lubbock. And at night you could see the Lubbock lights 30 miles away, because there's nothing between it, right? So, and then went to college in a community out here, served my first 3 full-time churches were in the West Texas area. And so, small rural towns was all I knew. That's who I was. My first lead pastorate would have been in a little community called Clayton, New Mexico, a town of about 2,000 people in the northeast corner of New Mexico. And we were 90 miles from Walmart, to put that into perspective. All right.
So it's an hour and a half to groceries.
Yes, and you had to cross state lines. You had to go to Colorado or Texas to get to the nearest Walmart, right? And so that was the most remote community I've ever been a part of. And so, I saw a lot of, community identity that happened there, and folks that cared for each other, right? And then we spent just over 5 years down in a community called Alamogordo, which until we moved to Lubbock was the largest place I've ever lived, at about 30,000 people. It was an Air Force community. And so kind of like there were some feelings of rural ministry, because it was kind of out there by itself, but it was a much larger place, right? Like 2 McDonald's, a big Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, like it was a different spot than where I'd grown up. we had 5 years there. And yeah, I mean, just as I developed some relationships with folks on what's called the replant team at NAM, just opened up some opportunities to do some writing for them, to lead some pastor roundtables, and that opened up the door to a very part-time job, which ultimately a couple of years later opened up to a full-time job. And
wow.
So yeah, really just the Lord's kindness. And I never thought, I had no desire, inclination to work for a convention entity.
Right.
And yet, here we are. And it's been a wonderful experience to kind of get to serve in some ways as a pastor to pastors in this season.
So looking back on that, give me some bullet points about lessons learned in a small community. If and because we'll have some pastors listening to this. So when you're pastoring in a small community, what's unique about that assignment that you can only learn when you've walked those miles?
Yeah. And small town pastoring is just different than the city. Because, if you do it well, you're going to be so ingrained in the life of the community, right? So, when you go to a football game on Friday nights, a high school football game, you're going to interact with folks from your church. You're going to interact with folks in the community that grew up in your church and probably haven't darkened the door of a church for 30 years, right? But there is a connection in small town ministry that I just haven't seen in now living in a little bit larger city. And so, like doing pastoral counseling on a whim in, the Dollar General, right? Like that's just, that is the reality of small town ministry. When I was in Clayton, as I said, kind of about 2000, we actually had a movie theater. We had a movie theater, one screen. They showed one movie a weekend. And man, especially if there was a family friendly movie, I mean, in a lot of ways, it felt like church on Sunday morning because you'd have folks like up visiting in the aisles before the movie started, and when it ended, like folks would be, stick around outside and talk for a while. Like there was a community connection in that experience in small towns that I just haven't seen play out in the city in quite the same way. And so, pretty quickly, a rural pastor can become the community pastor, right? Where folks will consider you their pastor, even though maybe they've never been to your church, outside of a funeral or something like that. But yeah, there's a really cool, unique way that you can love on and shepherd the folks in an entire community in rural settings.
So did you see gospel penetration with that? Because there are people in the community who probably are going to hold the church and the gospel at arm's length, but when they see you as the church, as the community pastor, kind of like a parish pastor or whatever, then they come to you. And so, what kind of gospel fruit did you see there? Probably from people who in some ways were kind of hardened to it because, the church is over there. I don't have anything to do with that unless there's a crisis. So, some.
And in fact, I would say I heard several stories years after I left of folks that finally, Jesus finally got a hold of their heart.
Right.
And I had a part in some conversations.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of that fruit I didn't see during my tenure there. It came afterwards. And, in fact, I was visiting with now 2 pastors later. And this guy telling me about some folks that are involved in his church. And I said, man, I had some conversations and they could care less. 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And yeah, they could have cared less at the time, but over time, the Lord grabbed their heart and their attention.
Well, this is, it's Apollos, or I planted, Apollos watered, God gave it the increase. I mean, you don't know. And I think that's a take home lesson for all of us, not necessarily confined to the local church experience, that we never know the investment that we make in a conversation, being patient with someone, pointing them to the word, praying over them, whatever is going to play a role in their submission ultimately to Christ. And so,
I remember reading, and I wish I could remember who said it. But ultimately every pastor is an interim pastor, right? So, I mean, whether you're there for 2 years, whether you're there for 25 years, you are there for a season. Yeah. And then someone else will take the reins of that. Right. So, we can't be, we can't be selfish about seeing results happen, right? We can't be envious of seeing, people that we've invested in and someone who comes after us finally getting to see the fruit of that. Praise God. The main concern is, are people coming to faith in Christ? Are they being saved? Is the kingdom advancing? Right. And did I do my part faithfully while I was there? That's the big question.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so you in our conversation already, you've affirmed something. I did a podcast with another guy who works with small town, rural churches, and man, I was so struck by a comment that he made, because we live in this age where the internet allows people in the smallest of communities to hear excellent preaching all the time. Yeah. I mean, they can hear big church pastors who get to study 30 hours a week and prepare. And one of the comments, and you may be one of those guys that's just like a top 1% communicator. I've not heard any of your messages. But one of the things this guy said was that small church folks will accept mediocre preaching if they get excellent shepherding. And so, man, I just held on to this idea that that the role of pastor is not just about the preaching. The pastoral ministry is the shepherding ministry, and that's what's so valuable in those smaller contexts because of the relationship. So, do you agree with that? Is that a reasonable way to look at things?
Well, and in fact, I would say if you are a solo pastor of whatever size church, wherever your context is, but if you are a solo pastor, and you're spending 30 hours in study, I would actually argue that you're probably neglecting some more important duties. And here's what I mean by that: preaching is important. All right,
sure,
every week. That is a deadline that has to be met, right? And
Sunday's
one of the primary functions of pastoring is preaching. No argument there at all. But the things that really impact your people and will make your sermons have more impact is the relationship that you have with your people. Yeah. And so look, like if you're a guy that's like, man, I need that time in the study. Here's what I would say. Like, spending time with your people is sermon preparation, because you're getting to know them. You're getting to know their interests. You're getting to know, the things that have happened in their lives. But because you're not just preaching to an empty room, right? You're not just preaching to pews. You are preaching to people who have real things going on in their lives, and real needs. And real interests. So, when you're thinking through sermon illustrations, like if we've got a group of people in our church who really like, baseball, or they really like Andy Griffith. Like, you can pull out some illustrations that will connect, right? And so, spending time with your people is not taking away from sermon preparation. It's part of serving as a pastor and shepherding them. And so, look, spend your time in the study for sure. Don't neglect the study. But I think a lot of times, if I'm honest, introvert pastors can use that as an excuse to not have to be around people. And that is neglecting the ultimate role of pastoring if you're just locked away in your study. the time.
Wow.
So, man, get to know your people. Spend time with them in their homes, in their places of work, coffee shops, diners. Hear their stories, because that will make you a better pastor, and it will certainly make you a better preacher.
Right. So you're doing sermon prep in the Dollar General. You were talking about doing pastoral
100%. Absolutely. 100%.
So your statement, spending time with your people, is sermon prep. Man, that is pure gold. I appreciate that. And man, so
I wish I had, that's something I've come to see in the last 5 years. I wish I had understood that more when I was serving as a lead pastor.
Yeah.
So, if the Lord I've learned so much in these 5 years stepping out of that role, right? I did it for about 9. Now I've been out of it for about 5 doing this. Should the Lord ever put me back in there, I've seen so much in the last 5 years ago. Oh, man, I could have done that better. That would have been great.
God gives us different perspective, doesn't he? That being able to look back and see things with a broader lens. It's interesting that in seminary, I'm working on a degree right now. I spend a fair amount of time with seminary students, and so much of what I see is directed at, you got to preach well, you got to preach well, you got to preach well. Yeah. And like you said, I get it, but man, I there's so much is accomplished with the good pastoral engagement, and it's hard to teach that.
Yeah, because the reality is, when you look back on ministry and the impact that you've had, we use a lot of words in sermons, right? Most of those are forgotten, if we're completely honest. Most of the words that you use in sermons are forgotten. The things that people remember are those moments that you were just there. Yeah. During the loss of a loved one, during the birth of a child, during a birthday party, those moments of celebration, those moments of mourning. That's when those are the things that make the impact on people. And again, I'm not diminishing the preaching of the Word of God, right? Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the Word of God, right? The preaching of the Word of God is powerful. But man, when folks look back, it's those moments where you were just there, where you were present and you were loving on them. That's the thing that folks remember out of your years of ministry.
I've got a book on my shelf. I don't know if I've read it. Probably like most of the folks who listen to this, I've got many books on my shelf that I haven't read. I don't know if you fall into that category or not, but the title of it is the Ministry of Presence. And man, sometimes I think, again, I've never studied preaching, but I think we have a sense that preaching can only happen from the pulpit. But man, some of the best sermons that I've heard have been sitting with someone at a restaurant, and when I've been delivered the word at the right time, and so. Yeah, you have to be ready in all of those cases. Well, so Noble Warriors, let me twist this just a little bit. So our mission is serving local churches as they equip men to walk with Christ and lead well. So one of the beliefs that I have, and I keep trying to test this with conversations, is that if you really, the small town, maybe solo pastor in any context, one of the things that is going to help him is investing in a few men who will walk with him and stand with him in ministry. I say often that in the New Testament, we see Jesus and Paul ministering broadly. They cared for people that were outcasts in the community, and it was shocking to the culture and to the religious elite, but they had broad ministry, but deep investment in a few men. In both of those cases, they were investing in a few men. So maybe you did this just because you understood that it was the right thing to do as a young pastor, or maybe you see it differently now looking back. But what is your thought, or has been your experience with making strategic investments in a few men that would walk with you in the ministry?
Yeah, so we're actually doing this right now in our church.
Okay.
There's a gentleman who was a director of missions when I was first got into my lead pastor. our association in Northeast New Mexico didn't have a DOM. And so he was in a neighboring association. I got to know him, and he invested deeply in me in discipleship. Well, fast forward now 13 years later, and he came to be a part of our church that we're at in Lubbock. And I'm the discipleship minister. We're trying to get some stuff off the ground, and we're having a hard time. And so I just looked at him and I said, Dan, I think the Lord sent you at just the right time, because I'm trying to get started what you did in me. Right. And he jumped in. And so we've got a couple of groups of men's discipleship groups. We're meeting weekly, memorizing scripture, walking through, I have a reading plan that we're walking through together. So we sit down for about an hour and a half on Sunday afternoons and just say, what's the Lord teaching you? We recite our memory verses from the week. And so the plan that we're using has us memorizing a couple of verses at a time through the Sermon on the Mount.
Sure.
And so in May, we actually stood up in front of the entire congregation on a Sunday morning and recited Matthew 5.
Wow.
Which is pretty wild to even know, look back and go, man, I actually pulled that off. But there's something about this group of men and seeing what the Lord has done in their lives over the last year. We had one particular, I won't name his name, but when he came in last year to our group, he was just angry. And you could see it, angry just about some stuff that had happened in his life, hated his job, hated his boss. And quite frankly, the path that he was on was not leading to a good place at all.
Sure.
In fact, I think he was on his way to prison for one reason or another. And the Lord has just radically changed his life. And to get to be a part of that, and to know that, through our group of men who have invested in one another, that, his life the trajectory for his life is drastically different than it was 10 months ago.
Yeah.
And man, to see the Lord do that, it's the power of the gospel at work visibly, right? Right. Where you can say, man, this guy, his entire life and his outlook on life and the way he interacts with people has been radically changed through Jesus and the power of the gospel.
So is he married?
No, single guy. Okay. And actually, late 20s. But in all honesty, he'd given up. He was like, well, I'm just too old. Nobody's gonna marry me. And we were able to go, tap the brakes, dude. It's you're 28. Life is not over. Have some patience. And I think a year ago he was not ready for a relationship in any way at all. And there's probably, like all of us, there's still work to be done, right? Sure. But I think, as I said, he's in a much better place spiritually, walking with the Lord, and God is preparing him to be a husband and a father. Right. And
so when we invest in men, everything around that guy changes. You've already mentioned his attitude, his posture, all of those things are impacted by Christ in his life. And so it is a great joy to see those things happen. So grateful for that. And I think that's one of those things that, how are you coaching small church pastors, rural church pastors, to live out Ephesians 4:12, to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, to specifically try to raise up some elder qualified men to stand with them? Because I think it's Robert Poodles, if I'm getting the name right, the church. I'm gonna screw it up, but David Murrow quoted him. Leon Poodles was the guy's name, the church impotent, and he talked about that many churches are male general surrounded by an army of women who do the work of the church. And so what he's pushing for is for pastors to invest in men so that there are some guys who stand with him. And so are you coaching guys to invest in the development of elder qualified guys? 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1 kind of guys?
Yeah. We on a small scale, yes. We are having some conversations in our team right now about how to ramp that up, because here's what we're seeing. We have particularly in small town rural ministry, the number of pastors who are getting ready to retire is high.
Huge.
And we don't have the pipeline of guys ready to go in there. On top of not having the guys, a lot of the men that God has called to seminary, going to a small rural bivocational setting is going to be a very hard sell, right? Especially if you're graduating with, an MDiv and $40,000 in debt. And, oh, hey, by the way, there's this church that can pay you $20,000 in a parsonage, right? Like, I mean, that is, quite frankly, that's just a hard sell. And so, we're going to have to rethink the model of what a rural pastor looks like, right? And you've already mentioned this, but I think in many of these churches, the next pastor is sitting in the pew already, or he might be sitting in the bar in the pew. He doesn't even know Jesus yet, right?
Yeah.
But and so the strategy is going to have to be we invest in the current laymen in the church, disciple them, right? Not discipling them so that we get a pastor, but discipling them because that's what we're called to do.
Right.
And then out of that, praying that the Lord will raise up somebody who goes, you know what, I think I can do this. And they've already got a career, right? So, it's more than likely going to be a bivocational situation, but you have somebody shepherding the church that was saved through the ministry of the church. I think that's, if we look at that, we don't have a shortage of resources at all, right? If you consider it that way, the Lord has given you everyone that you need in your church right now. If you will simply look around and go, who can I start spending time with? What 2 or 3 guys can I get together on a weekly basis? And we just start, reading the Bible together, praying for one another, and just see what the Lord does. Do that.
Absolutely. So that guy maybe.
And I would say this too. Go ahead. And I would say, like, through that, God might raise somebody up and then call them to another church, and that's still a win. It's still good, right? If you're developing leaders who then go and serve elsewhere, man, praise the Lord. You are doing the kingdom work for sure.
100%. As a matter of fact, I just had a conversation with a rural pastor who's he was excited because he's investing in 3 guys. And he said, I'm seeing some life change in these guys, and it's changing our church to have some guys that are stepping up. I mean, he's seeing some movement there. And so I began to talk with him about what it would look like for God to call one of those guys to go and be a pastor somewhere else. Now, this guy started out as a truck driver and has not been to seminary. And so God prepares people differently. And so that guy, that pastor, I'm going to have him on as a podcast guest here before long, but he began to weep at the thought that God could work through him to call another man into ministry. And I just marvel at how low a value we set on what God could do through us in terms of calling other people. We have a tendency to not believe that God could do something like that through the small church. I also think about
and I would say,
go ahead.
Because we get questions all the time, like, what discipleship curriculum should we use? What's the process? The process does not have to be complicated. Like you said, it could be, you grab a couple of guys and say, hey, we're going to meet, Monday mornings, we're going to meet Tuesday mornings, and we're just going to open up the Bible, right? Sit down with Bibles open and read a story, and talk about it. Like read a passage, discuss it. And it's hard work to make that happen. It is hard work. It is not simple, because when you start discipleship, you run into, you're going to learn things about these guys that you didn't know.
Right.
There will be hard moments. So I don't want to say it's easy, but it's not complicated to make it happen.
No, it's not complicated. It's not easy, and it is incredibly rewarding. I mean,
Yes.
I've got 4 young dads that I meet with every Friday morning. I'll be with them tomorrow morning. We're reading through the New Testament this year together. We just started Romans, and my wife, if she were on here, she would say, hey, his favorite time of the week is hanging out with those 4 guys on Friday mornings, because the way the Lord is causing the Bible to leap off the page and just grab them by the heart is so stinking exciting. And so I'm grateful. I tell them I'm investing in you guys, 2 Timothy 2:2, because I expect you to go multiply the kingdom. And so 100%. I even say I don't hang around with punks. And so I'm hanging with you guys that I think the Lord has a plan for leadership in some way for the kingdom, in the kingdom for you. And so we have to have that mindset and see the joy of investing in other men. I want to throw out one more scenario with this. I think, so you're in Lubbock now, you're at a larger church. Yeah. And so I would love to get your thought about, man, there are retired school teachers, there are retired engineers, there are retired military guys. There are guys who already have some stream of revenue and they have skills that the Lord has given them. They may not have been to seminary, but if they've been sitting under gospel preaching for a number of years and have studied the word, then these guys could be pretty easily equipped to go and lead a church. Yeah. And so in my heart of hearts, I believe we need to do a better job of casting vision for second career guys to say, yes, Jesus, you take me to the corner of New Mexico and I'll love people and lead a church for 8 years as a retirement gig. Is that a viable strategy that we should be casting vision for and talking about?
Yeah, because, we're right at this place where, the youngest boomers are starting to retire, right? So in the next few years, we're going to see the oldest of Gen X start to retire. I realize not everyone is in this situation, but a lot of folks are going to have a decent retirement built up, right? So, and, through, like you said, through, school teachers, military folks, especially if you have, and here's another resource. Like if you have somebody that's in your church that's in any way related to the military that put in their 20 years, they're not going to be retirement age. They're going to be 40s, and getting to retire out of the military and have a pension coming in and going, okay, now what? Yeah. But so we have a large segment that there's going to be that they're going to have some source of income already. And generally speaking, I think we're seeing that our retired folks are going to be in better health in the years coming, and
get more gas in the tank
are going to live for a while. And I think we're looking at generations, certainly with Gen X, and I think millennials. I can speak because I is one. Yeah. We are, the idea of retirement and playing golf five days a week. I don't think that's the dream, right? The goal is to hit retirement and go, okay, now what? Like, so I'm not having to rely on a job for income. So now what is God calling me? Where can I serve? It could very well be that God's calling some retired men to go, like you said, go and pastor a church for 5-6 years. And get to, with whatever the supplemental income the church can provide, but you get to go serve in a more or less full-time capacity because you have another income stream and get to be a blessing to a group of folks. and proclaim the gospel, make disciples, love and shepherd people in a small rural church. Small church in the cities or the suburbs, like those exist too.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
And
in the urban context, small church.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think this goes back to the sermon that John Piper preached 30 something years ago, right? Don't waste your life. Like don't retire to Florida just to go spend your days picking up shells and sailing on your boat, right? God has something more for you than that. And what an exciting proposition, and I tell you, man, God's doing something. So you talked about being at the convention last week.
Yeah.
Did you notice the number of strollers around the convention?
Yeah.
They had to add more sections, right, for stroller seating because there were so many young people. And listen, God is doing something
right
in North America. God's raising up younger generations. So we have, some young men and young women that God's calling into ministry that will be there for the next 4 decades.
Right.
And I hope my prayer is that as our senior adults look back and see what God's doing among the younger generations, that stirs some stuff up in their hearts to say, you know what, I'm not dead yet. I can, God can still use me in some big ways here.
And some of those young people are actually thinking about, hey, I would love to go to a place where it's going to be great to raise a family. So there's some young people that are, their ministry strategy is co-vocational because they want to be in a place that's livable and where they can raise a family. So there's a lot here. Well, Kyle, for the sake of time, we could go on and we may have to get you back because I just love this conversation and the inspiration that it could be to some folks. But I think about the book Halftime that asks the question, what are you going to do as you move in your life from success to significance? What are you going to do next? And so is there another resource that you would recommend for someone about the rural church that could be a help to someone who's thinking, or the small church, how do I do this well? Or if God's stirring my heart as a result of this podcast, what could I read? Where could I get some more information? We'll provide a link to your office at NAM, but is there anything resource-wise that would be helpful?
Yeah, I got to write a chapter in a book that was released earlier this year through Whip and Stock called "The God of Small Places."
Okay.
This was put together by the editors were a guy named Glenn Daman, who ran an organization called Village Missions, and a guy named Jeff Clark, who is actually what I do for NAM as the rural guy. He does for the IMB as the rural guy. And so it's not specifically, and I know your platform is not specifically Baptist. This is not specifically a Southern Baptist book. It's just broad evangelical pastors looking at just rural ministry. Again, it's called The God of Small Places. And then another one that's not specifically rural, but certainly has a lot of applications in rural is the book Reclaiming Glory by Mark Clifton. That was the first book that I came across, and it talked about, revitalization, renewal, replanting, and really stirred my heart towards what that can look like. Because we know across the board, somewhere around 80% of our churches are in need of revitalization, renewal.
Right.
And I believe in small town, rural churches, that number is probably even higher.
Sure.
And so, he just lays out 6 principles of what it means to lead through a season of renewal in your church. I would highly recommend that one.
Love it. Well, listen, as I said, for the sake of time, we're going to have to shut this down, but I greatly appreciate your time. The conversation, I believe, is going to be an encouragement to some guys, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch and continuing to point guys in your direction, because I do think there are folks sitting on the sidelines wondering what God could do in them and through them next. And moving to an area and getting involved in a church, maybe not as a pastor, but as a very active couple or family in a small church, could be a huge gift to a young pastor or to a struggling pastor. So, man, there's so much that can we do. But make a final comment, and then I'll shut us down. Kyle, anything you'd like to finish off with here for the guys?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Even if God's not calling you to be a pastor, God might be calling you just to go and give your life.
Yep.
Or give 5 years in a small rural place. With whatever job you have, just go and be a missionary there. Right. And like you said, to go and say, you know what, we're going to find a church that is in need of some renewal, and we're going to go encourage the pastor and serve in Vacation Bible School, serve in children's and youth ministries, and just see what the Lord can do to spark new life.
I love it. Love it. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Noble Man Podcast. I keep saying contest, but it's a podcast. I'll get that right eventually. Kyle, thanks for being with us. Thanks for the work that you're doing, and I pray that God will continue to use you to encourage those small town and rural church pastors to continue the good work of advancing the gospel. So, folks, thanks so much, and we'll be back next week for another episode of the Noble Man Podcast.